Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. Today I am going to do the New Year, Same Old Me book tag for 2025, an original tag created by James at Quaint and Curious Volumes, based upon the tag which I just did yesterday by Kevin Toll. James felt that a different set of questions should be asked, and so he revised the tag. He kept a couple of them, or at least one of the original prompts, in place. But so I will go through these. Now, I copied out my prompts from James's own description box, and somehow he has number 4 duplicated. So even though the numbers go from 1 through 9, he has 2 4s, so there's a little bit more than that. So number 1, regrets. What is one book from your 2020? Well, it says 2025. I think maybe it means 2024. What is one book from your 2024 reading goals that you regret reading or that haunts you? And for me, of course, it would be this, Les Mis. This was not the edition I was using to read it from. I actually had a couple of options. There was a recent Penguin edition and also the Modern Library translation, which I think this was based upon. I don't want to keep revisiting this, but I find that as I watch everybody's year-end videos on BookTube, invariably when people decide to tally their best loved books, the best 10 or the best 5, it seems like this book keeps popping up. I regret that I spent so much time on it, that I spent so much time thinking I should push myself ahead with it, and that I spent so much time then just afterwards not able to get my reading together after that experience. So I am hoping that this will be the last mention and that I don't see it brought up in any other BookTube videos. Maybe I should just hold off for a while. But it is a perennial classic that I bet will keep coming around. Number 2, Penitence. What is the one book on your 2024 reading goals that you feel guilty for not reading? And there's a problem for me because I have no way to trace anything like that. I don't have a written out set of goals or a written out TBR, to be read list. So when I started the year, I don't think I had a schedule of things that I was going to read. So there you have it. Number 3, the Albatross. Are there any books you had on your 2024 TBR that you are glad to say you won't read in 2025? Well, I sort of answered that. I don't have a written TBR. Number 4, Pruning. Have any 2024 books led you to reconsider any long-term reading projects? And yes, they have. A number of the books which I tackled last year were books of literary criticism. So I read a volume titled Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, part of the Modern Critical Interpretations series edited by Harold Bloom. And it was a bit of a struggle. I kind of enjoyed it, but kind of not. I also read No Other Book, sort of a compilation of the best of literary criticism by Randall Jarrell, and the best of it was fine, but from head to tail of that book, I'm not really sure how useful it was to me. I am no longer in a state where I expect to be doing any writing. Questions of the literary canon, of what work of literature is superior to another, that kind of thing, it just doesn't mean that much to me at this time. I also read Was Huck Black? That was perhaps the best. That was talking about Mark Twain's book, Huckleberry Finn, not about the character. And it was interesting, and as a special case, I would say it was worth reading, definitely. I certainly think that the novel itself, Huckleberry Finn, would have been wasted on me had I not followed it up with Was Huck Black. But there again, I would rather not read an inferior novel that requires so much explaining. And then also, finally, but not last, I read The Literary Mind and The Carving of Dragons, a real old work of Chinese literary criticism. And that had certainly passages. It had 50 chapters, and it had chapters, maybe a handful of, say, 6, half dozen, that were really worth the reading. And then, Claw just went in. Ooh. And then a lot of the rest was, again, this whole sort of evaluating, is this book is better than that book, and this writer was better than that writer. And I don't know how useful that is to me. I mean, even the sections where he was talking about how to write better. My writing career is past me, and I take an interest in learning what an authority of your has to say about what constitutes good writing. But again, as far as practical application, there's probably little in my case, because I don't foresee the occasion arising. So, number 4, again, this is the second number 4, Lying Fallow. What is one author or genre that you're taking a break from in 2025? Well, literary criticism is an obvious one. Oh, I should say, I didn't feel like struggling to get those books that I mentioned, at least those that I have, out from their nook behind other books and so forth. So I thought I would just pull out I was introduced to literary criticism very young, and it was particularly this book, which also contains a very nice anthology. One doesn't hear it talked about too often. It's got the complete poem, Pearl, which is, I don't know where it is here. That's, oh yeah, here it is. I mean, this is Pearl, and it's got the I don't know if that's a translation or the notes. I think it's a modern English translation, yeah. And it's really, really wonderful. And that in itself was the best part of this book. But there were essays, and this, of course, is a whole series that Penguin did. And it introduced me to literary criticism, and throughout my life, throughout my career, I have been a fan of literary criticism. I don't think that good writing can survive much without any kind of good critical acumen, or acumen as you will, upon the part of a readership. So I've always been a lover of good criticism. It's just that at the stage in life that I find myself at right now, I don't think it's necessary. Anyhow, I keep going back to that. Well, I did want to show you these. I like the whole series. I think I read probably the first 4 books in the series and then didn't get much further. When I was buying those, the series contained 7, and then they upgraded it and it contained 8 volumes or something like that, or 8 and then 9, something like that. And back in those days, you couldn't find them. So this is my original, and this I picked up at a much later date when buying books online became available. So, did I answer that? What is one author? I didn't quite. What is one author or genre that you're taking a break from in 2025? And actually, I see on BookTube everybody trying to broaden their focus, trying to read more books by women or books by men, I guess, or books by people from the LGBTQ plus community, or however, or people trying to read more books from the global south, or more books from every single country that there is, that kind of thing. And in my case, after my fiasco of last year following that book, whose name will not be mentioned, I've decided to narrow my focus considerably. And so I'm going to be reading history, and I will be reading substantial novels. And when I say substantial, I don't mean necessarily big novels, but I am going to stay away from just sort of spur of the moment novels, such as that one that I read last year. It was a noir set in LA, and I just want to minimize my risk of reading a bad book in the year forthcoming. So I'm narrowing my focus, and we'll see. These narrowing plans may only hold true for the first several months. I always give myself the allowance to change my mind. Number 6, stay the course. Is there a series that you started last year that you might complete this year? And by gosh, I am hoping that there is, and that is the Imperial China series published by Harvard. Let me see if I have a list of the books here. Well, I don't see a list of the books. Too bad. Well, this is the last, it's the final book in a series of 6. I read the first 3, which were all written by Mark Edward Lewis. I am delving back into ancient China now, archaeology and so forth. But when I finish with that project or sub-project, I hope to resume in this series with book number 4, then number 5, and then this one. That is my hope. So that is the series. Number 8, Breaking Walls. Do you have a non-book related goal for 2025 that you wish to share? Now, I answered that question in one way in the video that I posted yesterday, and I thought I would give a different answer for this video, and then I'm going to just read you a little bit of excerpts from some books, since I like to do that. My goal is going to be to try to convince people that don't want to think about food or that feel that they have been thinking too much about food, that it's okay to do so. So that's my goal. I don't know how aggressively I will pursue that goal. But I thought I would just read a little bit of stuff from the archaeologist, or actually anthropologist, that I have been reading. Let me see. I'll read a couple of different sections from this. To say that the consumption of food is a vital part of the chemical process of life is to state the obvious, but sometimes we fail to realize that food is more than just vital. The only other activity that we engage in that is of comparable importance to our lives and to the life of our species is sex. As Cao Tzu, a Warring States period philosopher and keen observer of human nature, said, "Appetite for food and sex is nature." But these two activities are quite different. We are, I believe, much closer to our animal base in our sexual endeavors than we are in our eating habits. 2, the range of variations is infinitely wider in food than in sex. In fact, the importance of food in understanding human culture lies precisely in its infinite variability. Variability that is not essential for species survival. For survival needs, all men everywhere could eat the same food to be measured only in calories, fats, carbohydrates, proteins, and vitamins. But no, people of different backgrounds eat very differently. The basic stuffs from which food is prepared, the ways in which it is preserved, cut up, cooked, if at all, the amount and variety at each meal, the tastes that are liked and disliked, the customs of serving food, the utensils, the beliefs about the food's properties, these all vary. The number of such food variables is great. And he goes on for his purposes. An anthropological approach to the study of food would be to isolate and identify the food variables, ... so forth. My academic, aside from my gastronomic interest in Chinese food, came originally from a study of Shang and Chao bronzes. The use of the ritual vessels was related to the preparation and serving of food and drink, but without an understanding of the essential food variables, I found it hard to understand the bronze vessels in their original context. My pertinent research, Chang, 1973, convinced me that at least one of the best ways of getting to a culture's heart would be through its stomach. And finally, just a little bit more talking about the preoccupation with food. How much do the people think about eating in their daily life? Or stated differently, how much is the anticipation of eating a factor in regulating an individual's behavior in the short run, in the same way that the anticipation of death, for example, serves as a powerful factor in regulating his behavior in the long run? As Firth, 1939, says of the Tikopia, To get a meal is the principal work on most days, and the meal itself is not merely an interval in work, but an aim in itself. Another example of psychological preoccupation may be seen in this passage of Lin Yutang. No food is really enjoyed unless it is keenly anticipated, discussed, eaten, and then commented upon. ... Long before we have any special food, we think about it, rotate it in our minds, anticipate it as a secret pleasure to be shared with some of our closest friends, and write notes about it in our invitation letters. Lin Yutang's favorite Chinese gourmet is a gentleman who lived about 250 years ago by the name of Li Yu, or Li Wang. Li was fond of crabs, and he wrote in one of his literary works that, "As far as crabs are concerned, my mind is addicted to them. My mouth enjoys the taste of them, and not a single day in my life have I ever forgotten about them." This brings us back to the observation that the Chinese are probably among the peoples of the world most preoccupied with eating. In a number of recent publications, Levi-Strauss seeks to establish some universal expressions of humanity through foods, cooking, table manners, and people's concepts about them. But these are all among the sharpest symbols of cultures, and to understand them, one must first of all understand their uniqueness and the way in which they uniquely symbolize their cultures. In this sense, the Chinese preoccupation with food and eating provides its own explanation. There has been much attempt to see Chinese poverty as a culinary virtue. Journay explains the inventiveness of Chinese cooking in terms of undernourishment, drought, and famines, which compelled the Chinese people to make judicious use of every possible kind of edible, vegetable, and insect, as well as of offal. This is certainly a useful explanation for some aspects of the Chinese food habits, as discussed above. But poverty and the consequent exhaustive search for resources provide only a favorable environment for culinary inventiveness and cannot be said to be its cause. If so, there would have been as many culinary giants as there are poor people. Besides, the Chinese may be poor, but as Mote points out, by and large, they have been well fed. The Chinese have shown inventiveness in this area, perhaps for the simple reason that food and eating are among things central to the Chinese way of life and part of the Chinese ethos or ethos. So this book obviously was written a while ago, copyright 1977. Many of the Chinese are not so poor as they were back then. Here's a nice illustration for you. And to close it out, I think I will just read something a little bit more recent. The Food of China by E.N. Anderson. In a world where hunger is all too common, China manages to feed 1/4 of the human species on a relatively small area of cultivable land. This success is due in part to an efficient socialist government. However, it also depends on China's agricultural system, which is not only productive, but also, at least in principle, sustainable. China's agriculture does not depend on machines and chemicals so much as on highly productive crop varieties, recycling of nutrients, efficient use of water resources, and highly skilled intensive labor by hundreds of millions of peasant cultivators. As modern industrial agriculture changes due to rising energy costs and massive poisoning of soil and water, the Chinese option will become more attractive. The future of humanity probably depends on combining Chinese-type intensive agriculture with the techniques of the high-tech era. So I think from both standpoints, both from sort of the historical one or anthropological one or sociological one of the best way to learn about a culture may well be through its stomach, and the applications in an age when we possibly foresee or possibly can foresee the advent of food shortages and the like. From every perspective, it can well be suggested that thinking about food is a very worthwhile activity, and nobody should be dissuaded from doing it. So I will leave that there. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel. Oh, and as for that little bit of drama that went on, the orange fellow that you have sometimes seen in these videos came by and made the one that was here uncomfortable, so she left. I was hoping that he would show up, but he did not do so. Thank you for stopping by.